is life, and it is on the basis of this that every single human on the planet look for food for survival. Because food is the foundation of our growth and healthy living, yet it is affected by a series of avoidable dangers from every angle. We can strengthen our food systems and change the narrative through a new approach to improved food availability and healthy diet.
Welcome to Urban Family Farming,
where we explore the exciting world of urban farming. Learn how to transform your living space into a green oasis with our expert tips and tricks. Join us on a journey towards sustainable living and discover the joy of growing your own food in the heart of the city.
I'm here to talk about greenhouse and then greenhouse production. So largely in greenhouse production, so many people have always asked greenhouse, and people confuse greenhouse with greenhouse emission. Greenhouse in agriculture is actually different from environmental greenhouse. Okay, in general environmental studies, there's what we call greenhouse emission, which is normally hazardous to the environment. But in agriculture, greenhouse is a tent, a structure that is built for the production of your vegetables. Normally, it is a tent that has a covering with nets and then has ridges and irrigation pipes by which you can be able to produce your vegetable all year round. You know, somebody has once asked me, say, what is the advantage of greenhouse? Because, you know, one of the disadvantages of greenhouse is that the initial capital necessary for the construction of a greenhouse is normally expensive. And then I said to the person, I said, well, if you're even looking at it in the commercial sense, you can be able to recover the initial, capital expenditure from the first cycle of production. So normally, there are many advantages that a greenhouse farm has that the open field farm does not have. So what are these advantages? Maybe that may inspire you to want to have one of these greenhouses. One of the advantages basically is exponential yield. You know, if you have a greenhouse, the greenhouse, for example, the tomatoes normally grows vertically. And anything that grows vertically will naturally produce more fruits for you than the one that grows down. So if you have a greenhouse, there is guaranteed exponential yield. If you have seen a cucumber growing before, you will notice that at every stage of the cucumber's vegetative development, there is fruit growing on every side. It's the same thing with the greenhouse as well. One of the days we tried to experiment between the tomatoes grown on an 8 by 40 meters greenhouse. And then we also compared it with the tomatoes that is grown on a 1 hectare farm. At the end of the day, the comparison reveals that the tomatoes that was grown in the open field 1 hectare gave about 500 baskets of tomatoes. But at the end of it all, the tomatoes grown in an 8 by 40 greenhouse gave about 40,000 kg of tomatoes. So naturally, the yield from the greenhouse tomatoes or the greenhouse crops are naturally exponential compared to the yield that you get when you do your vegetative production in an open field. So if you want to compare the yield, if you want to compare the outcome or the output that you get from an open field compared to the one that is in a greenhouse, you will always have a higher yield in the greenhouse. Another advantage of the greenhouse is the quality of the product you get from a greenhouse. So you see, the tomatoes, I'm using tomatoes because tomato is the one that everybody is familiar with. Now, if you take tomatoes, for example, the tomatoes that you grow in a greenhouse naturally will stay outside your fridge for 20 to 22 days, and it will not get bad. And compared to the tomatoes that you grow in an open field. The wisdom behind this is simple. The tomatoes in the greenhouse naturally have about 90% fiber, okay? While the tomatoes in the open field has about 20 to 25% fiber. So which means if you carry tomatoes from the greenhouse and you compare it with the tomato that you grow in an open field, in your normal garden in the house, if you compare the tomatoes together, you will find out that the tomatoes from the greenhouse is weightier than the tomatoes from the open field. Because the tomatoes from the greenhouse, naturally has around 90% fiber. If you check most of these tomato paste companies all around the world, all over the globe, you will find out that the tomatoes they use for the tomato paste production is mostly the tomatoes from the greenhouse. The reason they do that is because you end up getting more tomato paste from a tomato that is from the greenhouse as compared to the tomatoes that is from the open field. Because you see, the tomato from the open field had around 80% moisture content, in some cases 70% moisture content and 30% fiber. Now compare it with a tomatoes that is about 80% to 90% fiber, and naturally you have more paste from the greenhouse tomatoes. Again, the tomatoes from the open field, because of the high moisture content, naturally spoils faster. If you try it, you can carry an open field tomato, carry a greenhouse tomato, keep the both of them side by side and allow them for 20 days. You will discover that after 20 days, the open field tomato has melted, is spoiled, and it's just useless. You can't use it anymore. But the greenhouse tomatoes can stay after harvest for 20 to 21 days and it will not get bad at all. So you see, there are many advantages. Another advantage of the greenhouse is that if you have an open field farm, let's say you're gardening in the back of your house like the one that some of you already have, you will find out that sometimes if you have an area where there are chickens, chicken can walk into your green area, maybe your garden and all of that, and the chickens will just end up, spoiling everything that you have planted, eat up the seed of the vegetables that you have planted. But in a greenhouse, it is an enclosed environment. And because it is an enclosed environment, chickens cannot get into the greenhouse. Rats and all these lizards, normally they get into your farm, your garden. The rats will eat up your vegetables at that vegetative stage where you need the vegetables the most. So you'll be competing with the rats, whether you actually grow the vegetable for the rat or you grow the vegetable for yourself. But you see, because in the greenhouse, it is an enclosed environment, you don't have the problem of rodents, you don't have the problem of rats, you don't have the problem of lizard eating up the vegetables that you are planting, because the environment is controlled and is enclosed. So you see, the greenhouse is always very advantageous. Now, somebody said to me that I don't have space to build a greenhouse, and you need a big space to build a greenhouse. And I said, no, you don't need a big space. I have a greenhouse. This is my house. I'm actually doing this video in my house. Now, this is just about 5 meters away from my house. I have a small greenhouse there. I'm going to take you there shortly after this video. You will see that the greenhouse is a 5 meters by 5 meters greenhouse. And on an average, we harvest about 2,000 kg of tomatoes here in this greenhouse, because the expected yield from every stand of the tomatoes is around 20 to 25 kg of tomatoes. So you can see that beyond the exponential yield, beyond the quality of the product that is grown in the greenhouse, beyond the protection from external infestations and all of that, the greenhouse is always advantageous. Remember, you don't need big space. We can build a greenhouse on a 3 meters by 5 meters. We call it family-sized greenhouse. Maybe you don't want your wife to be going to the market every day to buy tomatoes today, buy pepper tomorrow. So you can cut out a little portion of the house, and then we can be able to have the greenhouse. Whether it's a 2 by 5, whether it's a 3 by 5 meters, whatever size of greenhouse you have, no matter the size of the land you have, we can fit in a greenhouse there. Another challenge with open field production is that there is always that case of that outbreak. You will remember some years back in this country, there was a situation of what we call total absoluta, for example. It's a tomato disease. You see, when that tomato disease entered into Nigeria, especially in Kano and all these areas, the entire tomato field was wiped out. But you see, all these diseases can actually be controlled if you have a greenhouse. Because you see, some of these diseases, especially total absoluta, it is an airborne disease. Wind can actually carry it to your farm. But if it's in a greenhouse, the net and the leather will protect such kind of, outbreak from getting into the farm. So you see, all this pest infestation, all of these things are totally controlled because the environment is controlled. You know, and somebody said something, he said, in the open field and in my garden in the house, you see, sometimes you have to wait because of rain, you have to wait for the rain to go so that you can be able to now start, start planting your vegetables. I know you know also that if you have had a garden before, you will remember that anytime the rains come, anything you plant outside will be in danger of rain. The simple reason is because when the plant starts to flower, when rain starts to fall, the rain will naturally knock off the flower. And if you're a good agric student, you would have known by now that the flower is the fruit of every plant. You know, the flower is what turned out to become the fruit. So if the flowers are off, then it means what you have is aleo. You just have spinach. You don't have fruit. So the idea behind it is that most of the times when the rain comes, everybody stops doing their garden and everybody just goes back and waits for when the rains will go. But you see, with a greenhouse, because there's the tent, the covering, you can grow your crop all year round. Whether it's January, it's February, March, April, whether it's June or July, whatever time of the year, you can naturally grow whatever vegetable you want to grow. So you don't have to wait for the season, you can determine the season. You know, another advantage of greenhouse is water use efficiency. Now, in most houses that I've been to, there's some places that are complaining of rain. People say that there's no enough water in the house and all that. But you see, in a greenhouse, what you have is what we call an irrigation system. An irrigation system helps you to efficiently use your water. It efficiently uses your water in the sense that you don't need to waste water. Because with the irrigation system, it is the exact quantity of water that the plant need that you are going to give to the plant per time. But you remember in your own garden at home, you have a watering can, or maybe you have a bucket like this. You have to carry your bucket, and then you fetch water, and then you go and pour it on the plant. You'll be wasting a lot of water. And then, of course, some of the plant will not get enough water as much as they need. But you see, in the greenhouse, because of the irrigation system and the emitters you have, the water that will be going to the plant will be the exact quantity of water that the plants need. So I just did this as an introduction, and I'm going to show you a few things that you need to know about a greenhouse before I take you into the greenhouse. But I think let's start with the structure. Let me show you what the structure looks like, and then we'll come back and I will show you what the nursery looks like and how to make a greenhouse ready. So come with me to the greenhouse. Let me show you what the greenhouse looks like. So come with me to the greenhouse. So from the outside, this is a 5 meters greenhouse in the width, and then you have another 5 meters in the length. So the length of the greenhouse is 5 meters, the width is 5 meters. Like I've rightly said before, the size of the land does not matter. It's possible for you to have a greenhouse that is on a 5 meters by 3 meters. It's possible for you to have a greenhouse that is on a 2 meters by 4 meters. It all depends on what you intend to achieve, okay? So let's come in. Let me show you what inside of the greenhouse look like and the structures. Okay? So what's the first thing you need to do before you own a greenhouse? The first thing you want to do is you need to have a plan. It's normal, common sense saying that if you don't plan, you have actually planned to fail. So the first thing you want to do is to make sure that you have a plan. Number one, what do you want to grow? It is important for you to know what you want to grow, because if you don't know what you want to grow, you will not know how to plan for it efficiently. Now, some people grow certain vegetables because of health conditions. Maybe they have a particular ailment, and then the doctor recommend a particular vegetable that they need to be eating every day. They may not always get it in the market. They may not always get it fresh. So what we advise is that, okay, you can have a greenhouse because you can be able to grow that vegetable consistently across the year. So for some people, it is because of health condition. For some people, they want to have a greenhouse because they want to know what they are eating. okay? You don't want to go and buy tomatoes that they are using water from the sockaway, of somebody's house, and they are growing the vegetable, and then you are buying it. You don't know the quality of the product you are eating. It can affect your health. So you want to know exactly, so you want to plan it out. In planning it out, what do you want to grow in the greenhouse? Okay, I want to grow tomatoes, I want to grow pepper, I want to grow all of that. Greenhouse is precision farming, okay? Because the kind of crop you want to grow in the greenhouse is also very, very important, and it will also end up determining the shape of the greenhouse. You see, and again, another thing you want to also look out for when you want to build a greenhouse is your location. You see, this greenhouse is in Kaduna. Kaduna is in Nigeria, okay? The temperature in Kaduna, Nigeria is totally different from the temperature in somewhere like Jos. Jos is in Nigeria, okay? But it's somewhere in the middle belt of Nigeria. And the temperature, the climate and temperature in Jos is naturally very, very cold, okay? Now, if you go to northeast in Nigeria, somewhere like Sokoto, Maiduguri, the temperature there is extremely, extremely very hot. So before you build a greenhouse, like I said, you need to have a plan. The first thing you want to know is you want to know the type of crop you want to grow in the greenhouse. Number two, you want to know the temperature and climate of the area you want to situate the greenhouse. Because you see that this greenhouse is looking like this doesn't mean everywhere you go, this is the kind of greenhouse or the shape of greenhouse you are going to have. Some places, the shape of the greenhouse has to change because you want to control the temperature in the greenhouse. Temperature control is everything in a greenhouse, okay? So the first thing you want to do is that you want to know what crop do I want to grow, because the type of crop determines the type of greenhouse you want to build. Number two, your location. If you are in a place where the temperature is naturally very high, the shape of the greenhouse will change. If you are in a place where the temperature is extremely cold, the shape of the greenhouse is going to change. So you want to know all of these factors. And then another thing you want to do is that you want to look at the topography of the area where you want to situate the greenhouse, okay? If the topography is undulating, which means that it is, up and down like that, or maybe if the slope is steep, a steep slope is something like you're coming down from, something that is falling down, is like a steep slope. If it's steep, then that means you have to make sure that the place is leveled out, and there's a reason for that, okay? So the first thing you want to do is that you want to check the topography of the area where you want to situate the greenhouse. For greenhouse structures, we advise that you get a topography that is very flat, okay? So you want to get the flat topography, and then after that, there's what we call the setting out. The setting out is that you want to now map out the area where you want to put the greenhouse. If it's an 8 by 20 greenhouse, you now mark out and then put your pointers, and then you bring out the greenhouse. Let me also mention this. Greenhouse structures, there are different types of greenhouse structures. In some places, because of the economic challenges and all that, people use wood to build greenhouses. In some cases, people use bamboo to build greenhouses. In some cases, people use pipes and all of that to build greenhouses. So whatever you want to use, make sure that you consider the wind direction of the environment where you are putting the greenhouse. Because you see, at the end of it all, if you don't get the wind direction, you will end up building a fantastic greenhouse. But when the wind comes, the wind will now tell you whether you have done a good job or you've done a bad job, okay? And the only way you can be able to determine that is to look out for the orientation of the greenhouse. And the thing you are considering is the wind direction and the sunrise and the sunset. The greenhouse need a lot of sun, okay? You need a lot of sunlight, okay? So you want to look out for the orientation. If I put the greenhouse in this direction, will the wind, when it comes, is it going to blow the greenhouse? Is it going to be in the eye of the wind? Or is it going to be in the way of the wind, okay? So number one, consider the orientation of the greenhouse. After you have taken the topography, you want to know what is the right orientation of the greenhouse. And then after that, you see, this greenhouse is steel, although it's inside my house, you see, but the pipes is made of pipe, because I have a lot of space in the house, so there's a lot of wind coming in and going out of the house, so we use steel pipes, okay? So this is made of steel. There are other ones that are normally wooden, there are those that are bamboo, people use all kinds of things, people even use pipe to build greenhouses. But like I rightly said, if you don't take consideration of the wind in that area and you use plastic pipe, for example, plastic pipe will not withstand wind. When wind comes, wind will actually shatter it, okay? So you want to consider the wind in that area. So for me, I'm using pipe to build the greenhouse. So after the pipe, you've gotten the setting out. After you've gotten your setting out, okay, you want to now make sure that you prepare your soil, okay? While you are doing your soil preparation, the people building your greenhouse can also be doing their work in the construction of the greenhouse. So for this one, for us, this is a tunnel-shaped greenhouse. There are different shapes of greenhouse, but for this one here in the house is a tunnel-shaped greenhouse. So, and then it's a 5 meter. So we are using a 2.5 to 2.5 meter spacing between each of the pipes of the greenhouse so that we can make it as strong as possible. And then the other thing you want to take note of also in building a greenhouse is that you want to take note of this leather here. Now there are different forms and there are different microns for different leather, okay? Now for us here in Kaduna, we are using the Solari. The Solari looks like a sack. It is in a sack-like form. But however, we use this one because this is, I think, 180 microns. There are also other leather that are like 200 microns. You see, the microns of the leather is important also for the location of the greenhouse. I don't need a 200 microns if I'm building a greenhouse in an area where the temperature is very, very high, because there's no point for you to have that high thickness of leather when the temperature in that particular environment is not so high after all. So we are using this Solari. Solari is what we use. It's also the leather for the covering of the greenhouse. And then we are using net. This net is not the usual net that you go in the market and go and get, okay? The net we use for the greenhouse is different. This net is designed to stand any kind of temperature. And not just the temperature, this net is made of 50 mesh. We call it 50 mesh net, okay? So this net helps you to take care of, you know, pests coming in, insects coming into the greenhouse. It is this net that stops them from coming in. But at the same time, this net allows the right wind, the right quantity of wind and air to get into the greenhouse. So we have the leather for the covering, and then we have the net also for the covering. So those are basically the two things we use. So for a greenhouse structure in a nutshell, you need basically three things. Number one, you need the pipe, okay, or what we call the frame. Either it's wood, either it's bamboo, whatever it is you are going to use. Number one, you need what we call the frame. So this is the frame, this is the pipe that we use. Number two, you need the leather. This is the leather. This is why rain can't get into the greenhouse. So you need the net to help you control the rain and then to help you control the temperature in the greenhouse. And then number three, you need the net. And then the net also differ with different locations, but particularly for this one and then also for different crops. But for this one, we are using a 50 mesh net to build this greenhouse. So these are the three things you need for a structure. You need the net, you need the leather, and you need the frame. You know, you want to make sure that your greenhouse is in a place where there's no fire, because if there's fire there, if fire touches the net or touches the leather, your greenhouse will be burned. So make sure that there's no fire around the greenhouse. It can actually burn the lead and the leather. And don't forget, the leather is UV protected. So it only determines the light and the heat that comes into the greenhouse. But the UV, which is the ultraviolet ray, does not get into the greenhouse. Okay, so after you build the structure, which is now what we've just finished talking about, you have this structure. After you build the structure, the next thing you want to make sure you get right is that you want to get this place where you're going to plant your vegetables. You know, for me here, I already have good soil here in the house, so I didn't need to bag. There was no need to bag the soil. There's no need for me to do to plant in pots. There was no need to do all of that because I already have good soil at the back of the house. Okay, so all I needed to do was to ensure that I get the right height of the ridges. So in the soil preparation, the first thing you want to also do is that you want to make sure that you know the kind of soil you have. In Africa, most oftentimes we don't pay much attention to soil analysis. But I will advise that if you can afford it, and if where you are doing the greenhouse is your personal land, or where you are doing the greenhouse is your house, I will advise that you run a soil analysis. The soil analysis will tell you the nutrients in the soil. The soil analysis will tell you about the moisture holding capacity of the soil, and all of these things are very important in the long run. So you want to do a soil analysis before you now start making putting your soil supplement and all of those other things that you will later need. So in the first thing, you make sure that you clear up the ground. Like this place right now, we clear up the entire ground, remove all the sand, remove all the stone. We dug up the ground so that if there are stones down there, because if there's stone down there, when the plant begins to develop roots downward, the stone will stop the root from developing very well. So what you want to do is that you want to make sure that that area where you have marked out the greenhouse, dig up the area, remove all the stones there, remove all the unwanted things that may be under there that you have not seen while the ground was flat, okay? So make sure you dig up the ground, remove all the stones, do all of that, and then you now begin to lay out your ridges. So this is one of the ridges. Let me use this as an example. This is one of the ridges in the greenhouse. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 ridges in this greenhouse, which is a 5 by 5 meters. Okay? So after you have done the ridges, you want to now introduce your cow dung. Like in some places, what I advise, especially for people who are going to grow their own vegetables in sacks, I will advise that you do your mixture before you bring in the soil into the greenhouse. So what I will advise you do is you get your topsoil. After you've gotten your topsoil, or the topsoil you've dug up from the ground, you get your topsoil, and after that, you get your cow dung. When you get your cow dung, you mix the topsoil with the cow dung. After you've mixed the topsoil with the cow dung, make sure you mix it very well. Normally, I advise that the ratio you use is that you use a 2-to-1 ratio, which means that for every topsoil, for every 2 ratio of the topsoil, you need 1 of the cow dung. So if you take 2 shovels, 1, 2 of the topsoil, you want to take 1 shovel of the cow dung. Then you mix it thoroughly before you start putting it into the bags. You start putting it into the bags. And if that is not the case, after you've done your ridges, you can now get your cow dung. I keep emphasizing cow dung because there is a reason why I'm emphasizing cow dung. You see, the chicken dung has 22% nitrogen, but the cow dung has just 9% nitrogen. And naturally, if you transplant your vegetable from your nursery into the ridges and you use chicken dung, the high percentage of nitrogen will naturally destroy or kill the vegetable at that stage because it is still tender for that high quantity of nitrogen. But for the cow dung, it's just 9% nitrogen. And 9% nitrogen cannot do so much harm to your vegetable. So when you if you are using the mixture and you're planting in bags, do the mixture thoroughly before you put it in the bag. Remember, it's topsoil, 2%, two portions of topsoil, 1 portion of cow dung. Mix it thoroughly before you put it in the bags or before you lay it in the greenhouse. But if you have a place where the topsoil is already good, after you've dug up the ground, you've laid out the ridges, you now get your cow dung and lay it neatly on top of the ridges. And after you've done that, you get your rake or you get something that you can be able to use to drive in the cow dung into the topsoil. So you do that thoroughly until the cow dung is thoroughly mixed inside the soil on top of the ridges, okay?